It's really a pleasure to have you all here. Let's start with a journey into the future of sustainability reporting. I would like to introduce you to the ideas behind this thinking, Why 3.0. So, from our perspective, we are embracing the idea of a green and inclusive economy, which can we achieve in 2030, actually as a sustainable future. In 2015, the UN will implement 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which should contribute to this vision. But the question remains, how actually can we achieve this? So we think that we need to backcast from this future to the starting point.
Well, we started the idea of reporting 3.0 around about 1.5 years ago. And it has three major aspects. The first one is that we think that we need to really take serious the idea of a green and inclusive economy. The second one is that reporting has a trigger function to play in all of that. And if those two aspects are met, then we do think that reporting has to be very different from what it is today.
A growing number of business leaders are saying the same thing, that this isn't simply about being more transparent. It isn't simply about being better or being nicer to the wider world. Fundamentally, we have a big problem, that economics and our economic system are in many ways dysfunctional. So we've got to change the way that economics work, we've got to change the way that the economies value resources and issues like climate change. So reporting is one critical piece of all of that, but I think there are many other things that we need to do. And I think for me, Reporting 3.0 is an invitation to a wider world to get involved in this process of change.
The definition of a platform is that you exist to help other organizations succeed, and by doing so, you increase the value of your standard, in our case, in GRI. So how important is this? I think it's critical. I think it's absolutely critical right now that not only GRI, but other organizations, like the Reporting 3.0 effort, are structured in a way that helps other organizations succeed. And that is, rule number one on creating an effective platform. So we're at this point in the marketplace where data, transparency, and we'll hear more about this later on, the whole role of big data in the marketplace. It's getting to the point where organizations are being besieged for information. And it's not just for sustainability data. It's for all kinds of data, HR data, financial data, and so on and so on and so on. So you hear about this thing like reporting fatigue, which is a kind of a misnomer. It's not that these organizations are reporting too much. It's that these organizations are getting asked for data so much that it's getting difficult for them to move forward. So as the GRI standard and framework becomes more in-depth and more precise, that report gets bigger and bigger and bigger.
One of the issues to note about the new ideas in reporting is that we're asking companies to do things with information that they've never done before. For example, with the old reporting methods, they had to track financial information. And they've known how to do this for years and years. For 100 years, we've done it the same way. So they know what kind of information is needed, and they know what kind of processes they have in their organizations to collect that information and deliver it to the right people. We're now saying it's not just financial information that's important. It might be environmental information, it might be social information or human capital information. And this information may be outside the scope of the systems and processes that they currently have. And what's even worse is that we're asking potentially about information that is sitting outside the enterprise boundary. Like we may be asking them about social impact information that not only do they not track, but they don't even have systems that go outside their enterprise boundaries today. And that's where technology can play a role in enabling companies to understand what information they need, to be able to track that information, to collect it and deliver it to the right people. But more than that, to be able to find ways in which information that they have not tracked before, such as social information from outside their enterprise, they can use big data or other tools to help them understand where they should be looking for that kind of information and what that information is telling them.
The market is missing such a platform of bringing together thought leaders, exemplary companies, investors, key decision makers. And so the absence of that is a problem. And so I think BSD and Reporting 3.0 platform fills this much needed gap.
One way it could affect what GI does is that it brings together best practice. So you have people that do reporting in their daily lives and their daily business operations, and they gather once a year to discuss what kind of advancements they have made in the last years.
Yeah, first of all, it was my pleasure to contribute to this conference. Yes, you're right, we have a pretty long track record when it comes to integrated reporting. A contribution would be that we could all and should all partner in this theater of reporting to even have a more concise picture on how corporate reporting will evolve in the future.
I think one of the biggest challenges is looking at the entire value chain. I think it's not a valid approach to say my business operations are net positive alone, because quite often those businesses are businesses whereby the manufacturing occurs somewhere in the supply chain, and that's the majority of the impact. So an iPhone, for example, 84% of the impact over the entire life of that iPhone is in the manufacturing and the raw materials phases. So we need to look beyond just the business boundaries, and in order to do that, we need to actually get information back. In a world where we had big international conglomerates that owned its own supply chain, the business had the information. Since the 60s, there's been a trend of demerging and offshoring and outsourcing, which meant that the only information you need back is price and maybe quality. You hand out design requirements, you get back the product, and you only need to know about the price. Today, we need to know about far more than just price. We need to know about the workforce, we need to know about any reputational risk, we need to know about scarcity, we need to know about natural capital, human capital, social capital. So we need information flows that flow through the value chain that aren't there today, and there is a role for big data in that flow.
For Interface, Reporting 3.0 is all about radical transparency. When you start incorporating sustainability into the core of your business, the core of your product, you really start changing the system, since you need to involve your suppliers and your customers.
We know that 1.5 planets isn't good enough. We have to get back down to 1 planet. But the question is, how are we going to do that? Well, we have to know what the context gap is, and we have to make each industry aware and each company aware of its contribution to that gap and how it can minimize it.
The project I'm working on is a new way to measure the impact of a company, whether positive or negative. The problem we've got today is that a company's impact is measured in one of 3 ways, either relative to past performance, relative to other companies in the sector, or relative to short-term goals which the company has set itself. None of those tell us how far the company has to go to be truly sustainable. They're all celebrating incremental improvement rather than necessary improvement to get to a sustainable future.
The science of well-being has been developed over the past decade and has slowly been adopted by governments, by countries and their leadership in order to better understand what is best for their societies. It's part of this whole push towards looking beyond GDP.
Inspiring people, and there are so many of them at one place here, and that really helps us all a lot to progress with this topic.
Sustainability means different things to the different value systems along the economic hierarchy. For example, it might mean something different to someone in Dubai, it might mean something completely different to the centrally planned economy in China, it might mean something completely different to the stakeholders in the United States than it does to Europe. So the the definition of sustainability varies depending on the values within the culture.
When I see the platform as it is, I believe BSD Consulting can very much help to also work in the cultural environment of the different regions. We have been having Miss Li Li from China being here as an example to just also respond to the needs of the local communities. And we've been working and doing roundtables in Sao Paulo. So you see the international reach of BSD Consulting is very much suited also for standard setters, for any kind of stakeholders, especially for the practitioners, to benefit from the learnings on an international level.
Could we take the decade from 2015 to 2025? It's around climate change, most obviously, but there's the fact that scientists are now saying we are moving into the Anthropocene era, where for the first time, one species dominates the planet. And when I talk about a CAT scan economy, I don't know how many of you have been through a CAT scan. I've been through it twice. I hate it, and I think it would be quite challenging to have companies in a world where we could see right into the guts of what companies are doing, what they're thinking, and I think this is going to be a war in some ways. I mean, it will be a battle between transparency on the one hand and stealth on the other. And I've always felt that at the moment where we started to see islands of stealth in the global economy could be quite a good thing as companies started to see opportunity, develop new technologies and business models, and start to go quieter, not disclose some of that sort of stuff. But increasingly what I find, in trying to think all of this through and where we might need to go next, the way I'm thinking about it is that you can think of three dimensions. You probably can think of more, but the three critical ones for me. One is the lateral dimension, which is it's almost like having multiple jet engines on the wing of an aircraft. And you could have 6, you could have 8 different forms of capital being processed. 8 engines or 10 engines is a hell of a lot. Increasingly, aircraft designers are trying to get these down to much smaller numbers. We have 2 here. It could be financial, non-financial, or whatever. But that's the lateral side of all of this, in my mind at least. The second dimension I think is critical, and I think it's desperately overlooked. And one of the reasons I stood down from the IIRC about 18 months, 2 years ago was I couldn't get the people involved there to pay enough attention, at least for my taste, to this piece, which is not just the company level of integration, or even the supply chain level of integration. It's about how you link what companies are reporting to what economies or cities or national economies are reporting, and how you feed into that data on how the biosphere is responding to all of this, the atmosphere is responding to all of this. That's a big jump from where we are at the moment. And then the longitudinal piece is the time dimension. You can think of the passengers in the aircraft as a metaphor, if you like.